Well, good morning, good people, fine people, lovely people of the internet. I can tell you this has been one of those mornings. Just one of those mornings. Been trying to get my work done. Haven't been able to do so. And it's a flippin' shame. I mean, I'm working on my future project, and at the same time, as well as working on my future projects, I'm working on my present projects as well. And I'm trying to get the longest project done. So therefore, everything that I plan to finish, it's gonna be finished. I don't know how soon, but it's gonna be finished. They're pretty much at the end game point. I'll just say it like that. So, you're probably wondering what's on this white screen. Nothing. Just like how my brain is going to be later on, it's going to have nothing in it. So, trust me, I'll have a video following this one in detail of why I'm feeling this way. Don't worry, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. We are going to continue the story of the legacy of the Seven Stars, and we are actually going to scroll all the way to chapter 3. Because if you remember from last time, Lance fought his way to Castle Aku, which somewhat kind of reminds you of Castlevania. But in this case, we're gonna move on, and therefore it's time for a young hero to make his mark on the world as we head into the next two chapters of this book. I hope you enjoy it. Chapter 3: Birth of a Hero. Many days passed since Lance made his absence from Hasincho. Within a fortnight's time, he reached a large castle which seemed normal enough. Perhaps enough for a long and weary wanderer like him to find shelter and food. The drawbridge came down as Lance read the runic letters on the side of the opening as he passed the bridge. As he stepped in, he was awestruck at the lavish setting that surrounded the area. With knapsack in hand, he trekked throughout the main hall with its wide and extravagant murals that paraded on the ceiling. On one in which he looked towards the right, he saw a dark dragon holding in his arms a vibrant young woman. It seemed to resemble an embrace of some sort. Could this be the lord and lady of this castle? He thought to himself as he turned to the left. He saw some warriors that were both on the ground in air, a sort of beings from mystics, dragons, and humans alike. Knights of the court, he thought to himself as he was astonished by the sight and beauty that this place beheld. "Excuse me, sir, but are you lost?" A soft and yet mature voice was heard as Lance turned to see who his greeter was. "Oh, pardon me, milady, but I couldn't help but notice this palace. And I can't read rune well, and I can't read rune so well either." Lance smiled a bit on that note. "Well, that's not rune at all, it's Gaelic." She smiled, continuing, "This is Moonstone Castle. May I ask why you're here?" "Well, you see, I am a former adventurer looking for a new line of work." He bowed, introducing himself. "Lance Tenchi Dragoon, at your service, my lady." "Well, Lance, I'll take you to see the lord of this castle," the slightly old woman replied as he was being escorted to the throne room. As he arrived, receiving audience to the king, he knelt in respect as he and his wife appeared before him. It was a tall and bulky man about Lance's size, but with more muscle. He was dressed in heavy black armor with a purple cape behind him. His sword was larger than Crescent Blade as he stood up. Standing on both ends were his knights. They were a mixture of human, dragon, and angel alike. Where are my manners? I am Dark Dragon, King of Moonstone. He waved his hand to the slightly old lady, then sat aside. This is my wife, Guinevere. Lance gasped in surprise as he remembered when he first entered the palace. She smiled softly to him as he bowed his head in respect to her. Are you that surprised? She replied with a giggle following thereafter. Dark stood up and stepped down from his throne as he pushed his cape aside, revealing his sword. Let's see if you're worthy of being a knight of the order. He drew a sword that resembled closely of a Zweihander, and flared his hands as it rested upon his hip. It glowed a deep, dark purple fire as Lance raised up his hand and flared it up as it grew to his bright orange aura that shined as bright as the sun. A sly smile appeared on his face as he and Dark clashed with one another. Sparks ignited as their swords locked with one another. As for their flames, their aura grew to an almost bright, blinding light. They leaped back from each other as they drew their stances at one another. Crescent fire! Lance shouted as he slashed out a small wave. In response, Lance shouted as he slashed out a small wave of fire at Dark as it grazed the castle floor swiftly. In response, Dark only held out his hands and absorbed it as it made contact with him. He returned an uppercut as it shot out a purple wave as it nearly hit Lance. Luckily, he raised his cape as a shield, and again, they both clashed swords. This time they stayed in close, pushing each other against the walls. It was a deadlock. Both held ground. It's apparent due to the cracks on the floor made from the two of them. Everyone watched intently as the fight raged on between the two of them. Back and forth they struck, steel against steel. Sparks flew as the sparring continued. The two of them flew in the air, striking their swords, and in a flash, one remained with a sword in hand. It was Dark. Sweat appeared upon Lance's face while holding his injured arm, nearly feeling his legs buckling. It's over. Seems you want skills enough. Dark gloated as Lance threw off his gloves, pushed himself up on sheer will and heart as his body started to glow a bright silver. Crossing his arms over his heart, his eyes flashing from brown to shimmering silver as he transformed into a hybrid version of himself. Raising his arms high, his voice boomed as a huge ball of energy was charging in his hands. You're right. It is over. Yo-hitama! He yelled as a massive beam of energy was released from Lance's hands and blasted Dark so hard against the wall it nearly sandwiched him. With that, Lance dropped to a knee, heaving as he looked to Dark, as he can only mouth out, "Nice fight," before passing out. With plenty of willpower, Lance showed that he is more than enough to be a hero, regardless of the cost. And that is a long, long page. I am so sorry about that. That was a long drop right there. I'm actually doing this while I'm actually reading this. Chapter 4. The New Moonstone Order. There they stood, the most dedicated and loyal, trustworthy soldiers ever made and drawn together for one common purpose. Although they were of different races, homes of proud origins, they wandered in and drawn as a unit, standing strong. Skyblade, the mystic warrior of an alternate world, in which should be like so. I said, which should be like so. Like so. There we go. Skyblade, the mystic warrior of an alternate world. He stood tall in his blue tunic and his wings relaxed on his back, wearing a pair of golden gauntlets and hovering an inch away from the ground. He resembled that of an archangel of a long, proud generation. Crimson 316, the most skilled archer in these parts. Formerly, he lived in a small home near Lake Crimson. He was born with the innate skill of being a one-shot legend with killer point-blank accuracy. He was about an inch less than Sky, wore a green tunic, with his bow wrapped around his right arm and a quiver of arrows strapped on his back. Having dirty brown hair, and wore a friendly smile to match his demeanor. Ark, who somewhat resembled Sky, but was quite different. He, too, was an archangel of a different variety. His origin is quite a mystery, as well as his appearance as far as being a knight of Moonstone is concerned. His skill as a magic user are questionable, as he has only been around for some time. And then you had the most distinguished people. That was only second to Dark and Gwen. Aegis, Fang, and Lady Eisen. Aegis was a giant of a man wearing a deep blue-plated armor, and on the side was a mace made of 10-karat gold. His betrothed was beautiful. She was slim, slender, and namely held a sword with some Gaelic letters on the blade. Although she was with Aegis, after the battle with Dark, she secretly became transfixed on Lance. Her eyes are shimmering yet hypnotic emerald, and of course she has a secret of her own to be revealed. In the depths of darkness, but rather standing on the side where Death 97 is loved Lady Ange. There wasn't much to say about Death as he folded his arms with his cloak of blue and slightly opened his eyes, showing a soft haze of light blue. Ange was that of a shapely vixen. She almost resembled that of that succubus that Lance fought before, but she was much different, and she was much in love with Death. And last but not least was Lance, beaming with pride with a smile as he was presented with the crest of Moonstone as he knelt holding his heart over his eye. There. Let me slow down. And last but not least was Lance, beaming with pride with a smile. He was presented the crest of Moonstone as he knelt holding his hand over his heart and spoke the words, "I do." His weapon, crescent blade gleaming in the sunlight as the jewels sparked the same as with Lance's purpose to rid the world of evil and injustice, just like his ancestors did. "Welcome to the family, Lance." Gwen smiled softly, nodding to him as he stood up. His face beamed with pride as he turned to his fellow knights in arms and greeted them with respect. However, when Lance met Eisen, he became transfixed with her when their eyes met. He felt something that attracted him to her, but for the moment he kept his distance since he was already with someone else, namely Aegis. After he unloaded all of his things in his quarters, he took the stairs up to the roof and he gazed out in wonder at the realm beyond. It was just amazing to see how far this world really is. Of course, when you're young, you're bound to know that there's so much more to figure out. Is it what you imagine this life would be? A calm yet strong voice was heard. Lance looked around as the sounds of wings ruffling were heard, and out of the shadows arrived Sky. As he stood next to Lance. "Sky!" Sky grinned a bit. "Well, naturally. Were you expecting someone else?" "No, not really." Lance felt the breeze in his hair a bit as he glanced at Sky. "Well, the only thing I ever wanted to be in life was a hero." Sky nodded, rubbing his chin slightly. You do realize it's a long road out there, right?" I know. But I can do it because I'm a dragoon, and we dragoons can do anything," proudly boasted Lance as he smiled. Sky smiled back, patting his back. "Now you sound like a true knight, Lance." With that, Sky vanished before his eyes as Lance rejoined the rest of the knights downstairs. By this time, there were more people who arrived this time. They were not knights of any kind, but mainly people of the court. Amongst this group were Dragon Lady, Dragoness, Dragon Goddess, DL Grim, Sweet Fantasy, and White Tigress. Now, naturally, most of these were women, but how they were brought, only Dark knows for sure. But that's none of our business now, is it? But Lance, being the young gentleman that he is, took his time meeting everyone, getting to know everyone there. Everyone was pleased to see Lance, really. In fact, there was a dinner in his honor for a first day as a knight. It was amazing how the women were flocking around him, but naturally it's his mysterious charm was always something that he had. Not just the women, but just about anyone who came in contact with him. One thing was for certain, he was very likable to his friends and superiors alike, and that's how it's always been. There was a grand feast made, enough to feed an army, heck, maybe 10 or 100. Many different dishes were prepared, such as roast boar, steamed vegetables, rotisserie chicken, a few cutlets, just to name a few. Everyone had a wonderful time talking and getting to know one another. Mostly they were fascinated with Lance's adventures. He told everyone about the recent one he had before coming here, and how he lost his comrade that helped him through the castle. The entire time they asked about his family and history, origins and such. Time passed and everyone got up to dance. Certainly Lance was the life of the party, since every woman wanted to dance with him. All throughout the time he was rather concerned, especially what's going on in the men's minds at this point. But this was his time, and politely excused himself from the party and aired himself out on the roof. Rubbing the sweat off his brow, he smiled bright as he laughed in sheer delight of how the celebration was. He was remembering the parties that his parents had before the war. He was awfully young and still under training, though, through his mother and father. I really need to slow down. He reminisced about how his mother would create fireworks and sparklers with just a wave of her fingertips, and how he marveled at them. Drawing out crescent blade, he thought of how much his father would show him many various blade techniques. For a moment, he laid his sword to rest as he stripped off his body armor. Though young, his body told a completely different story. He has a nice medium build, a firm chest, and strong yet firmly toned arms. Not bad for a 19-year-old, no? Picking up his sword again, he pointed his sword high into the air and slowly lowered it in front of his eyes as he took his battle position. He had in the position a pillar as the form of a dummy as he started his training. Little did he know that he was creating a show for the castle downstairs, as everyone was watching from the ceiling. It was made of the hardest glass-like material ever known, so it was safe since it doesn't break no matter how much weight is on it. He narrowed his eyes as he charged with just a flash, and zipped through the dummy with a stroke of slashes appeared, about 5 in all, as he lowered his sword and took a deep, soothing breath. He turned and faced the dummy again as he stepped back into his stance and righted himself with sword in hand, once again charging himself towards the pillar. He lowered his blade a bit on his approach, and then swept it upwards. With his sword as he launched himself into the air, doing 3 crescent moon-like sweeps, then sheathing his sword, and doing such, he struck a few punches and kicks, and finishing off with a drop toss, like a ninja. He leapt away and lowered his hands to his sides. Everyone was impressed with his amazing abilities, especially with the ladies. Makes you wonder what other tricks he could do. Sweet replied with a curvy smile. Very strong, not just in body, but in mind as well. Iceland hid a smile, watching. He's cute too, very cute. Tigress watched with interest as she sat up. I really need to slow down. I had a busy morning. Tigress watched with interest as she sat up. As the night went on, everyone was about to turn in. They said their farewells to everyone, especially the Lance, whom was on guard duty. The very last couples to leave were Eisen and Aegis, and she wished him a fond farewell with a smile. As for Aegis, well, he just really couldn't stand him now, so he left without saying a word. He did nod to him, so it didn't seem too much at the time, but was better than nothing. Throughout the remainder of the night, silence was all around, seemingly a peaceful night. As soon as the Lance was to turn to his quarters for the night himself, he picked up some powerful dark energy as he stepped in. With crescent blade in hand, he saw a dark blue figure in front of the throne, and with a wicked grin, he tossed his cape back, laughing at Lance. Is this all Moonstone has to offer to defend itself? Just a boy. Who are you, and what's your business here? Lance raised a brow to the huge knight. I And Dragon, remember it, boy, for I'm here to seize this castle for my own. He laughed again with his arms folded. Not on my watch, you don't, pointing his sword out to him. He continued, I am Sir Lance Tenchi Dragoon, defender of Moonstone. By the Silver Star, I will banish evil wherever it stands. And with that, the two launched at each other, clashing their swords wildly. It was hard to tell who had the advantage here. It seemed like Lance started off just fine as the fight continued, but slowly he was losing to Dragon. No doubt he was strong, stronger than Dark, but this was no exhibition fight. The castle was at stake and Lance was the only one to defend it. Dragon's power was overwhelming, nearly to a point where he's invincible. He had our hero pushed against the wall, nearly disarming him, but all of a sudden, with a mighty blow to the gut, Lance regained his ground back. Sheathing his sword, he decided to fight without it. Dragon staggered back a bit as Lance continued his counterattack, starting with a few shots to the face and then a kick toss to the wall. Angered Dragon struck back with a few strikes in which Lance tried to evade and defend against, but took a few hits on his body. Lance was growing weary and exhausted from the fight, but he couldn't rest, nor could he lose the castle on his first night here. This ends now to you, Lance Dragoon! Dragon rushed at him with his sword, charged in a deadly purple hue. As Lance managed to stand, his body began to glow again, bright silver, as he grabbed his sword with one hand, nearly crushing it. His hand was in the form of a dragon's claw, as he roared, tossing Dragon out of the castle with his spirit power. Out of the castle, as his spirit power died down with what remained strength was left in him. He couldn't reach his room in time, dropping to a knee. Abruptly, Aislinn came back and found him knelt and nearly out of energy. Lance! What happened? She called him as she was about to pass out. Dragon. He came here, but I stopped him. He smiled weakly as his body gave out just passed out as he closed his eyes. She scooped him into her arms, and she placed him in his quarter and stepped back a bit and as she laid him in his bed. In a white haze of mist, Aislinn transformed herself into a beautiful white dragon. She looked like snow, which is what she was called, Snow Dragon. She curled up comfortably as she watched Lance sleep for the rest of the night. Her emerald eyes softly gazed upon him as he lay quietly in his bed. This life was only the beginning for this young hero. You know, considering what I've gone through, I'm going to make it a bit longer. Let's go into Chapter 5, shall we? Chapter 5, A New Hero Emerges. The next day, Lance was brought to Dark and Gwen as he explained everything that happened the night before, after the party had ended. He explained the intruder was trying to seize the castle and who he was and how incredibly strong he was. This intrigued everyone, and Moonstone was put on high alert. As for Lance, he was promoted from castle guard to commander of the Dragon Knights. Thus, Commander Lance Dragoon was he, and as he changed uniforms, his blade began to glow and transform in shape and size. It became a bit shorter in length, and blade-wise, it became a bit slender, and it had a blue hueish glow, and when it was unsheathed, there was a silent beam sound to it. The name was called Saihakin no Dragon no Hikari, as it was called Saifa Dragoon, Saber of Light. Lance was in amazement as he held the sword in his hand as he raised it high over his head. His first order of business was basically seek out any strange sighting within the realm, all the while looking for the portal to the shadow realm where Dragon lies. This world was on a two-sided dimension, so mainly any other world can exist within the main overworld. Having no steed, he journeyed off into the overworld, which passed the gates of Moonstone. Glistening green grass as far as the eye could see, to towering mountains which lie like sleeping golems of eons ago. Now you're probably wondering how one finds a portal to begin with. It's fairly simple, really. Magic users and spellcasters alike have one thing in common: magic sense or magic vision. as the people of today call it. However, really need to slow down. Hours went on as Lance ventured further and further away from the main path. Going on a hunch, he traveled towards a mysterious place that was full of wonder and excitement. The place was called Peoria. The day continued on as Lance began to grow hungry and exhausted. Luckily for him, there was a cabin nearby for him to rest and mostly find some food. The weather was blazing hot, and the sunset was no better, as there was an unbearable chill from the back of him. He read the signpost, which mainly said, "Welcome to Cindy's." Dragging himself to the door, his eyes were nearly dropping and nodding his head to sleep. He banged his head against the door as he simply lay there, exhausted. Footsteps were heard on the other side of the door as it opened and Lance laid on something soft, as he was held. And a red-haired maiden with voluptuous curves and firm yet fair-sized breasts caught him and carried him to the couch. She sat on the arm of the couch watching him sleep. "You look so peaceful and handsome, too," she uttered quietly as he slept for seemed to be hours. The fight from the last night before wore Lance out, and the one before that as well. Burn marks from energy blasts were on his arm as well as the slightly tattered cape he wore. He slept soundly as the young woman nursed his wounds and fed him every so often. When he finally received consciousness, he opened his eyes and he looked around wondering exactly where he is. "Well, hello, handsome," she smiled to him with a wink. "Slept well, I see." She leaned to him. He blushed at the sight of her and nodded. "Thank you for your hospitality, miss." She cut him off, introducing herself. Sinful Cindy." Taken a bit surprised, he stood up and bowed deeply to her. "Sir Lance Tenchi Ryu Dragoon at your service, milady." He finished kissing her hand softly as he had taken his seat again. Looking around his surroundings, he was simply astonished at the mere and yet amazing look this seemingly quiet cabin had. A built-in bar near the corner of the room, music playing in the background somewhere. A soft yet hypnotizing sound was heard. It was the romantic yet passionate beat of the guitar strumming in the background. As his ears perked up with a smile to follow. "I love the guitar. My favorite instrument." "You live here on your own?" He turned looking to her. "You can say that it is under my name, after all." She smiled, winking to him again. She took a seat next to him, handing him a drink, listening to the music. "So tell me about yourself, Lance. Tell me about your story." And so he did. Lance explained where he originally came from, though a bit embarrassed on the grounds that he wasn't born on this planet. His remote home that he found when he first arrived here, and also his job as commander in Moonstone. She leaned on his shoulder and explained his family as well, where their history began and such. Paused for a moment and looked at her with a bit of worry. "I'm not boring you, am I?" He replied. She smiled and shook her head softly. "Not at all, Lance." She wondered how he got here to begin and naturally ventured out on his mission. He explained, but exhaustion got to him and thus he wound up here. He looked at the time and stood up to take his leave, and he was about to go. She caught his arm. And he was about to go. She caught his arm. "Tell me, will you come back?" She whispered softly, looking up to him. He smiled and nodded in response. "Don't worry, I plan to. Don't. He smiled and nodded in response. Actually, let me back up a bit, because I was thrown off by my family again. He looked at the time and stood up to take his leave. As he was about to go, she caught his arm. "Tell me, will you come back?" she whispered softly, looking up to him. He smiled and nodded. "Don't worry, I plan to, Cindy." He kissed his hand again and backed up as he touched his forehead, phasing out and teleporting himself back to the castle. Meanwhile, at the castle, the force got restless as they were wondering where the hell Lance was. But before they could even spout another word, in a flash he appeared before them, and his voice boomed as he started, "Dragon Knights, attention!" And they stood in attention as Lance, as he took his duty as commander of the Knights, into high gear. So with that, folks, I think I'm going to continue this another time. And next time, I go into Chapter 6, The Demons of the Past. I certainly hope you have enjoyed this little episode of Legacy of the Seven Stars, the audio edition. Hopefully, I hope you have enjoyed this. Really, I do mean it. And my apologies if I sound a bit rushed and flustered. Just trying to make things happen, you know. Family is doing, you know, fine, I suppose. Trying to keep my cool and all. But anyway, I will see you the next time on Legacy of the Seven Stars, the audio edition. Till then, I've been the Tenkaichi of Gaming, Ichigo Musco, and I'll see you later.